Hi, this is Willie Nelson from NORML. For 30 years, NORML has provided a voice for the millions of Americans who smoke marijuana responsibly. More than 500,000 Americans are arrested each year for smoking pot. These are ordinary citizens like you and me, whose lives and careers are being needlessly destroyed. To learn how you can help, contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free at 888-67-NORML.
And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, NORMLAudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Welcome back here to NORML's Daily Audio Stash today. It is Tuesday, November 6th, and I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us here at NORML to help us end marijuana prohibition in America. Just visit norml.org to make your donation or join NORML today. Folks, it's election day out there. It's a kind of a quiet year. It's an off-election year, but there is some definite activity happening with marijuana law reform. In Denver, Colorado, there is a ballot initiative for a new municipal ordinance there, and in Haley, Idaho, voters get the chance to cast their votes on 4 local marijuana-related questions. We're going to have special election coverage today and tomorrow here on the Audio Stash. Last year was a much busier election year. There were initiatives happening across California, in Arkansas, Missoula, Montana, a number of places, and many of those initiatives passed and are in place today. Also joining us today here on the program is a former director of NORML. He now runs the website marijuananews.com. Richard Cowan will join us today to talk a bit about presidential politics moving forward from today's election day. Richard is also the tour leader on the Sensible Amsterdam tour we've been advertising here on the Audio Stash. There's information about NORML's Sensible Amsterdam tour right up on our website at normalaudiostash.com. That takes place there in January. And again, Richard Cowan, we're going to talk about presidential politics with him today, but he's going to join us again next week to talk about that Sensible Amsterdam tour. And tune in tomorrow. We'll have the vote tallies from Haley, Idaho, and Denver, Colorado, with a wrap-up of everything that's going on out there. A lot of legislation is moving forward right now. A lot of legislation is being proposed. 2008 looks like it's going to be an extremely busy year, both for ballot initiatives and for state and perhaps even federal legislation. Let's get into our election coverage here today on Election Day by traveling out to the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming?
Kicking off our election coverage today, we're speaking with Mason Tvert in Denver, Colorado. Mason is the director of Safer Choice for Alternative Recreation. They successfully passed a municipal ordinance in Denver in 2005 and ran a statewide ballot initiative last year. Mason also sits on the board of Colorado NORML. He is running the current campaign in the Mile High City seeking to de-emphasize marijuana enforcement there. We spoke with him yesterday from Denver, and today there's a New York Times article looking at the ordinance. You can link up to that article at normalaudiostash.com. Mason, welcome back here to the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Very good to speak with you today, Mason, from the city where today's vote is via the U.S. Postal Service, via the mail. How has the momentum been on the ground there for this recent effort?
Oh, well, things have been going well with regards to the groundwork. We've been certainly spreading the word around the city, but we've definitely hit some snags with regards to voter turnout. Unfortunately, there has really been a small push to get voters out on behalf of the other measures out there that are obviously a little higher priority, like the big tax measures. And we've also seen the Rockies, the baseball team here, in the World Series for the first time, which certainly garnered the media's attention for the past couple months and has really kept this election below the radar, unfortunately. But we're hoping for the best.
And is voter turnout a tough thing in these off-election years?
Yeah, it absolutely is, and you know, but to put things in perspective, in 2005, when we passed an initiative here in Denver, we had about 100,000 voters, and in a very similar election in 2003 that only saw a couple measures on the ballot, there were 100,000 voters, whereas this year we so far only have about 50 to 60,000 voters, which is clearly far below the typical turnout in an off-year election. So not only is it an off-year, it's a far below average off year, and that's partially the result of this being an all-male election and, you know, a lot of the practices that have occurred here in putting it together.
Now, while the local media may have been following the Rockies there, this initiative has gotten some national media attention, including this New York Times article.
Yeah, it certainly has. So that should be interesting. And we, you know, as an organization, have always had the overall goal of changing people more so than changing the laws, and getting this message out that marijuana is less harmful than alcohol, and our law enforcement resources shouldn't be wasted punishing adults for using it. Has certainly gotten out and resonated around the city and across the state, and hopefully stretched to other parts of the country as well.
Mason, you and SAFER have brought a lot of attention to the issue of marijuana reform in the past few years. Amendment 44 was run statewide and received a great outpouring of support from around the state. And 2 years ago, Denver passed the ordinance decriminalizing 1 ounce or less of cannabis for those aged 21 and older. Mason, do you think people have gotten a little confused and think the situation has fully changed when it has not?
It's important to point out that Amendment 44 actually did not pass statewide. It only got 41% of the vote, and it did receive a majority in Denver. It's certainly confusing, and it is confusing to a lot of voters. So we're hoping that folks saw this on the ballot, recognized, made the common sense judgment that, it's not worth spending our limited law enforcement resources punishing adults for marijuana, especially when the people of the city have already voted to end those arrests.
Now, Mason, the last time we spoke, you were noting that since voters approved a municipal decriminalization ordinance in Denver, city police have publicly stated that they will follow state law. And disturbingly, minor marijuana possession arrests have increased in the city. Is this new initiative today in direct response to that, and how have citizens responded to those increase in arrests?
Yeah, absolutely. This initiative is in direct response to that. As you mentioned, the arrests did go up, and they went up by about 15%. And to put this all in perspective, you got to look at, for example, Seattle, which is a city that has about 17,000 more residents than Denver. They passed a similar lowest priority measure a couple years ago. Denver is currently arresting about 20 times as many people than Seattle in a year, which is pretty crazy, and it clearly goes to show that we could be making this a much lower priority. But it's very hard to convey these nuanced and difficult messages to the public, and we hope that people are upset to see that their votes haven't been recognized, and we do hope that they turn out to make their voices heard again.
So all the ballots in this election in Denver today, they're coming in via mail. No polls open, I take it.
There are no polls open, and then that certainly has to do with the nature of this election and why the turnout is so low. It's been an all-mail election, so there's been no build-up to an election day, and like I said, the media has had about 90% coverage of the Rockies over the last 2 months and 10% for everything else, and I don't think a news station has mentioned the election in the last month. So it's made it very difficult to get voters to be energized to fill out their ballots and get them in. And at this point, they can't even mail them in anymore. They'd have to go drop them off, which is similar to going to the polls, but certainly for a typical voter who doesn't know what's on the ballot, it's not very energizing.
But if folks did wait until the last minute, they can drop off their ballots today, is that right?
Well, if they already have their ballot, then they should be able to just drop them off. If they did not receive a ballot, and that's really one of the big problems here, is that about 18,000 Denver voters who are active and should have received ballots did not because of them having moved or something and not changed their registration address. So about 18,000 people did not get them, and generally those would be younger people. And then also a number of people who may have tried to vote in last year's election. About 17,000 people were turned away from polls in Denver. So a lot of those folks didn't even receive ballots this year. So there's certainly been a lot of issues, and we've been trying to overcome them and really get the word out to people on how they can vote and make sure that they get their votes counted.
Now, are you surprised to see this type of mail-in voting scheme for this election happening in Denver?
Yeah, it's been really eye-opening, not only just with regards to this system of mail voting, but also with regards to voter behavior in general. I mean, it's just been interesting to see that without any opposition to our campaign, without any opposition to the one other major tax issue on the question or on the ballot, there just hasn't been any news coverage or any media attention. There's been no build-up and no emotion to really get people thinking of it as an election. It's just kind of been dormant, and it's certainly lost my vote when it comes to ways of conducting elections. We were hopeful of the all-mail voting because we expected people would get their ballots. We wouldn't have to worry about turning them out to the polls, but that just hasn't been the case. I mean, tens of thousands of people didn't even get their ballots, and even more didn't even hear about the fact that there's an election going on. So it's been interesting.
And Mason, let me ask, could there perhaps be another statewide safer initiative in the future there, maybe even next year?
Possibly. I don't necessarily know if it'll be next year or some other time in the future. It's always going to be a matter of funding and strategy and so on, but we certainly hope to continue moving things forward here in Colorado and hopefully around the country, and continuing to generate discussion and getting more and more people thinking about these irrational marijuana laws that we currently have on the books.
And finally today, Mason, when do you expect to hear back on the initial vote counts?
We're expecting to hear shortly after the so-called polls close. Basically, people can turn in their ballots up until 7 p.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, Election Day, and we expect to start hearing what's going on sometime after that, between 7 and 8 p.m. probably.
Righto. Well, Mason, many thanks for joining us here today, and I look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow to check up on this vote.
Thanks again for having me.
Many thanks again. Mason Tvert is the Director for Safer Alternative for Enjoyable Recreation. They can be found online at saferchoice.org. We have links to the Denver campaign today right up on our website at normalaudiostash.com. We'll speak with Mason in tomorrow's Audio Stash to find out what happened with that vote. Denver isn't the only city that's considering some marijuana ordinances. Municipal voters in Haley, Idaho will vote today on a series of local initiatives seeking to liberalize marijuana penalties. 4 separate ballot questions will appear on today's ballot in Haley, including language that calls upon police to make marijuana law enforcement their lowest priority. In recent years, voters in various cities nationwide, including Seattle, Washington, Santa Cruz, California, and Columbia, Missouri, have enacted similar measures. Separate ballot questions will address the use of medical cannabis and industrial hemp, as well as the regulation of marijuana for personal use. Last year, the Idaho Supreme Court ruled that citizens can vote on the issue of legalizing marijuana, even if the proposed initiative conflicts with state and federal laws. The sponsor of the initiatives, the Liberty Lobby of Idaho, is also seeking to place marijuana law reform questions on the ballots in Ketchum and Sun Valley. We'll have an update tomorrow right here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash to find out how those ballot questions went in Haley, Idaho. We also have links to the Liberty Lobby of Idaho right up on our website today at normalaudiostash.com. finally today, for our election coverage here on November 6th, we're going to take a look ahead at some of the presidential politics of 2008 with a former director of NORML, Richard Cowan. Richard is leading the Sensible Amsterdam tour with CS Travel and NORML this January. Links to it are up at normalaudiostash.com. Richard is a keen observer of politics. He maintains the site marijuananews.com, and he spent many years as an anchor on Pot TV with Mark Emery in Canada. Richard Cowan, welcome back here to the Audio Stash today.
Glad to be with you.
Great to speak with you today, Richard. We're going to talk a bit about presidential politics as the polls close in this somewhat quiet off-year election day today, and the heat in an already hot presidential race in the U.S. gets turned up a couple of notches after today. Last week, we saw a marijuana decriminalization question get asked for the first time in a public forum, in a debate here in Philadelphia. Not couched in the terms of who had smoked cannabis in their past, but would they decriminalize recreational use today? Chris Dodd's support on this issue was used as the springboard for the question. What did you think about that question the other day? I might add, Philly NORML submitted a number of questions on the issue of marijuana, and this is how it got asked. You saw it with Tim Russert.
Well, I think that it was, sort of cowardice that we've come to expect from the politicians, that they just run from the issue, that they can't bring themselves to, to really even bring themselves current on it. And I think one example of this, though, we had an indication of it. It was with the Hinkie-Rohrbacher medical marijuana bill, which is basically would simply have stopped the DEA from raiding the clubs in California and other states that have medical marijuana laws. The fact is that that they couldn't get enough Democrats to vote for it. There was really the Democrats in the House of Representatives ran from that like it was something controversial. So if they can't get Hinkie-Rohrbacher through a Democrat-controlled Congress, then what are the chances of getting any kind of decrim through the Congress, which, of course, the president can't decrim on his own initiative or her own initiative. And so I think that basically what we have to look for is to hold their feet to the fire on their most of them promising to stop the raids, the federal raids on the clubs, and stop, the feds from interfering in the states' rights to do whatever they want to do with medical marijuana. Now, that is, the measure of things, and while I'm in favor of legalization, I think that the most we can reasonably expect to get out of the presidential candidates is a commitment to stop interfering in the states that have medical marijuana laws.
Richard, how important is the president in regards to marijuana policy? Or is it more important who he or she may appoint to the various posts, such as the Department of Justice, the ONDCP, and other agencies? Or is it the president who is ultimately very influential in our practice of marijuana prohibition and its enforcement?
Well, I think that, to use Teddy Roosevelt's phrase, the presidency is a bully pulpit, and someone pointed out recently the meaning of the word bully has changed over the years. It is not a pulpit from which you bully people. It's simply a great place to get up and preach. And so I think that in that regard, the president as the leader of what we used to call the free world, pause for laughter, is very important in that regard. And of course, his or her appointments in the two positions, the drug czar and the head of the DEA, who are presidential appointees, that really tells a lot. The fact is that the qualification for either position heretofore has been that you have to be able to lie with a straight face. In fact, I think that particularly the current drug czar, Walters, would gag on the truth if he accidentally said something that was true. The man is, really is a pathological liar, and same thing could be said of the outgoing head of the DEA, Karen Tandy. These people absolutely never tell the truth. And it's clear. I mean, they have to know they're lying because you can look and see how they pick through data and use it in ways that you have to have some understanding of it to be able to lie the way they do. So if the President of the United States, the next President of the United States, picks another pathological liar to be the drug czar and the head of the DEA, then it may be business as usual. But the fact is that from a states' rights point of view, which is something that is usually associated with conservative or Southern Democrats, that you would have, simply that basis, which Bill Clinton and then George Bush II promised that he would do, is acknowledge states' rights. And of course, two Southern governors, that was the most logical position for them to take. But of course, they in fact went back on their word. So this is something that it really gets down to a fairly narrow few decisions here by the next president, either to whether or not to appoint someone who is truth aversive to key positions, and whether or not to interfere in the state's medical marijuana programs. Those are the key decisions that the president, by him or herself, can make.
And Richard, in mentioning the administration that's on the way out right now, there doesn't seem to be anyone with any real change on the horizon. We can look at the current hopefuls on both sides the media spends the most time on here, like Mitt Romney, John McCain, or Rudy Giuliani for the Republicans, Hillary Clinton, John Edwards, and Barack Obama on the Democrat side. It doesn't seem like any of these candidates offer something different on marijuana policy than George W. Bush himself. Some, like John Edwards, seem like they might even have a chip on their shoulder about their past use, and they may end up being worse.
Well, one of the things that would be bad in that regard is that if you have a Democratic prohibitionist in the White House, you will not get the kind of support from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party that we can get now, because they are not bashful about opposing a Republican. And so that's basically what happened under Clinton, that for the most part, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party just remained silent during the 8 years as arrests went up and up and up, and as he abandoned the whole his commitment to medical marijuana. They couldn't say anything because it was their guy. However, I think that one of the things that is changing is that, consider the other day when Drew Carey came out in favor of medical marijuana, that some of the stories I saw about it was, that was so brave, and was he putting his career in jeopardy? And, this was just, breathtaking that he would do this. Well, I mean, is there any other issue which would be considered, daring to agree with 80% of the American people? Is there any other issue where the politicians wouldn't be running toward that rather than away from it? And then, and contrast that with the way Mitt Romney looked when the fellow in the wheelchair asked him about medical marijuana. I mean, quite aside from whatever views that one might have on medical marijuana, Romney came away looking like just an absolute creep, that he ran away from this guy. He couldn't even give him a straightforward answer. And so this is, in the age of YouTube, there are a huge number of people who've seen Mitt Romney as a creep. And by the way, one important point about Mitt Romney is that amongst his supporters is Mel Sembler, which a name will not mean a lot to most people, which is unfortunate, because Mel Sembler is the founder of Straight Incorporated, one of the most viciously abusive drug treatment programs ever invented, and ended up paying out millions of dollars in damages to some of their victims. And so this is the man who was also, amusingly, the head of the defense fund for Scooter Libby, and had been appointed U.S. ambassador to Italy by Bush II. And this is a guy who is backing Mitt Romney. And of course, Rudy Giuliani is the guy under whom marijuana arrests in New York City while he was mayor went from almost nothing to tens of thousands a year. And there were periods of time when more people were arrested in New York City on marijuana charges in a decrim state than were arrested in all of Canada. So this is, and the viciousness of Rudy Giuliani. And by the way, one more thing about Giuliani. The other day, the progressive left was up in arms because he had lied about cancer survival rates under the British health system. Oh, he's lying about that. Well, my goodness, that the politician's lying. This has never happened before. What is interesting is that they actually, went after the specifics and said, here are the actual statistics from the UK, and here's why Giuliani lied, and so on. Did they object when Giuliani lied about medical marijuana and said that there was something that, he said that, there's no need for it? No, that's okay. It's okay to, as far as the progressive left is concerned, to lie about medical marijuana, and they lie about socialized medicine, and they get up in arms. So that, is something that, quite unrelated to the candidates per se that we have to deal with, that we have to persuade Paul Krugman, for example, to find it as objectionable to lie about medical marijuana as it is to lie about the British medical system.
Now, the issues around marijuana, federal raids on medical marijuana facilities in various states, overall decriminalization, these have really gotten themselves into the presidential campaign so far, largely through the work of two New Hampshire groups, SendTheRightMessage.com and GraniteStaters.com. They've gotten all of the candidates to at least answer on video the question of whether they would keep up federal medical marijuana raids, like what we see in California. And Philly NORML submitted those questions to the Democratic debate the other night. So is this the way we keep the issue alive as the primaries and caucuses start to move forward?
Well, I think that, what they did in New Hampshire there with Romney is a perfect example of the way to do this. We have seen another example of a politician making a total fool of himself, in fact, ruinously, was George Allen in his macaca moment in the Virginia senatorial race. And if you have a video camera and just go to them and ask them the question, somewhat along the lines of what Romney was asked, will you have me arrested? Or in a more abstract sense, Governor Romney, what do you think is the appropriate jail penalty or jail sentence for a medical marijuana patient? What do you think that is the appropriate punishment for somebody who uses marijuana to treat cancer and AIDS? Ask them questions like that, because those are the real questions, and not just Romney and Giuliani, but all of them. And that is, and get it on camera and then put it on YouTube. And that will take a toll, because no politician wants to end up looking like Mitt Romney did on that interview. So this is a thing that now, believe me, the politicians are more afraid of video cameras than they are of anything else today, and that's the way to do it. And just keep after them.
Well, Richard, this has been a great conversation here today. I really appreciate you taking time to join us here on the Audio Stash. I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.
Glad to join you.
Thanks again. Richard Cowan is a former director of NORML. He runs the site marijuananews.com, and he spent many years as an anchor with Mark Emery on Pot TV up in Canada. Richard is leading the Sensible Amsterdam tour with NORML and CS Travel. Information about that available at normalaudiostash.com. We're going to speak with Richard again next week about that tour.
You're listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
And we've got a great music set here for you today on Election Day. Help you get on out to the polls in Denver and Haley, Idaho, and get ready for everything that's going to happen in 2008. Let's start things off with this track by NORML Advisory Board member Willie Nelson. Here's his song, Peaceful Solution. There is a website up there if you'd like to make videos that are related to marijuana law reform. You can use Peaceful Solution as a soundtrack. You can submit those videos to Willie's competition, may get chosen, win some prizes out there. We have links to that project on Willie Nelson's website right up at normalaudiostash.com. Here's the song, Peaceful Solution.
let's take back America. There's a war and we're in it, but I know we can win it, so let's just take back America. There was a dream, so believe it. Now get ready to receive it, and we'll take back America. And when the war is over and we've won it, let's remember how we done it so we don't have to do it again. There is a peaceful solution called a peace revolution, and now let's take back America. Called a peace revolution, and now let's take back America. There was a dream, so believe it. Now get ready to receive it, and we'll take back America. And we'll take back America. And we'll take back America.
That was Willie Nelson with Peaceful Solution here on the Audio Stash today. There is a special website project going on with that song Willie is sponsoring. You can use it in videos about marijuana law reform. Submit those videos. Could get some national airplay and win some prizes. We have links to that Willie Nelson video competition right up on our website today at normalaudiostash.com. Stay tuned. More pod-safe music coming up.
What's up, y'all? This is Soja, and you are right now listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Big up yourself.
Here's a guy who found the podcast up on MySpace. Here's Brian Ashley Jones with his song Johnny Appleweed. If you're a group that would like to get some pod play here on the Audio Stash, send us an email over on our MySpace page. We've got links to it at normalaudiostash.com. Or send us an email to chrisg@normalaudiostash.com. We will take MP3s. We'll give you credit. We'll play you on the air, just like this guy. Here's Brian Ashley Jones with Johnny Appleweed.
He's Johnny Appleweed. He drops his little seeds. He's a friend of a friend and a friend indeed. He's Johnny Appleweed. He sows his seeds all over the ground, but he digs a little deeper on the Indian mound. He's got pots of clay and a pot on his head. He's got a little sweetie and her hair's red. They're gonna spread the dirt and the joy around, and even when they're gone, there'll be more in the ground. Ever so fertile is the dirt and the rain. Little Johnny's smoking and he's calling her name, 'cause he's Johnny Appleweed. and he drops his little seeds. He's a friend of a friend and a friend indeed. He's Johnny Appleweed, with his bloodshot eyes and a pet raccoon. He goes to Mount Vernon by the light of the moon, with a burlap sack full of nature's best and a strong dislike for a urine test. While his probation officer is turning her head, he drops a few seeds in her flower bed. He's waging a war on the old policy and puffing on a pipe that was made for peace, 'cause he's Johnny Appleweed, and he drops his little seeds. He's a friend of a friend and a friend indeed. He's Johnny Appleweed. He's off into the sunset on a mighty steed. He gives him an apple and his proper feed. He's living for tomorrow as his fortunes grow, and he knows you're gonna like what he loves to sow, 'cause he's Johnny Appleweed. He drops his little seeds. He's a friend of a friend and a friend indeed. He's Johnny Appleweed. He's Johnny Appleweed.
That was Brian Ashley Jones with Johnny Appleweed here on the Audio Stash today. We have links to him on our website at normalaudiostash.com. You've been listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Make sure you visit our website at normalaudiostash.com. That's NORMLAUDIOSTASH.com for more information about every day's show. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow. The podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redaphid.com.